Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Burges Watson, and we've got an action-packed edition coming up today as the UN Security Council gears up for a vote on whether to end UNIFIL's peacekeeping operation in southern Lebanon. We ask, why are some people calling for the mandate to end, and what difference does UNIFIL make? Plus, we'll speak to a French Foreign Ministry spokesperson for his take on the re-implementation of sanctions on Iran by France and two other European powers. And, being Thursday, we'll get a check, as we do every week, of all the top stories in the United States. Hello and welcome to the programme. Plenty of developments coming out of Lebanon these past couple of days, starting with some public outrage over remarks made by the US envoy Tom Barrack. Well, he was in Beirut, so with his fellow envoy Morgan Ortagus, pushing for Hezbollah's disarmament. Well, Barrack had planned to travel to the south of the country, close to the Israeli border. But after making comments that many there saw as derogatory, protests broke out, forcing him to change his plans and cut his trip short. Well, Barrack had earlier told the Lebanese press to act civilized and warned them against behaving, quote, animalistically. Let's take a listen.
We're going to have a different set of rules, right? Please be quiet for a moment. The moment that this starts becoming chaotic, like animalistic, we're gone. You want to know what's happening, act civilized, act kind, act tolerant, because this is the problem with what's happening in the region.
Well, let's get more on this. We can speak to Richard Kouyoumjian, former Minister and Head of Foreign Affairs in the Lebanese Forces Party, who joins us from the Beirut area. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. I wanted to ask you first of all about a vote at the UN Security Council, a resolution they'll be voting on could end what's been more than 4 decades of UNIFIL operations in southern Lebanon. And I want to ask, in your opinion, should UNIFIL remain in southern Lebanon?
Well, UNIFIL was constituting like a buffer zone between Lebanon and Israel. However, unfortunately, I mean, UNIFIL was not playing the role that has been, for it. Hezbollah was developing an infrastructure underground, and after 2006 war. UNIFIL was supposed to play a much more advanced role in dismantling the whole South Litani area from any armed groups. However, Hezbollah kept developing his underground infrastructure, and we saw the result of it during the last war. So either UNIFIL would play a major role in applying totally 1701, or as we see now, the US and Israel was, they have a different position than the Lebanese state, and they wanted UNIFIL to end its mission.
So just to help us clarify this, you are of the same opinion as the United States, that in fact UNIFIL hasn't fulfilled its stated duties and responsibilities. Therefore, you think their mandate should not be renewed. Is that correct?
No, I mean, we wanted the UNIFIL to play its role. We want them to stay. Don't take me wrong. But we want them to abide by 1701 and to dismantle all militia groups' infrastructure in the zone which they control. So if they play that role, we are for them to stay. We want them to stay. So because it's important to help the Lebanese army and to play the role that they were supposed to play.
Okay, I mean, it seems the US wants the Lebanese government to be what they've called the sole provider of security in southern Lebanon. Do you think that goal is realistic?
Well, yes, absolutely. But the Lebanese army needs support, needs help, logistically and as well as financially. So once we support the Lebanese army, we back it, with all means, It's supposed to fulfill its role in securing the area and assuming the full sovereignty of the state. So yes, the Lebanese army can, but they should provide for it, the logistics, the finance, and the full support.
I mean, does all of this boil down to a question of money? Because, for an outside audience, people who don't know Lebanon well, they'll be saying, right, you've got UNIFIL in the south of Lebanon doing some military duties and activities there. Hezbollah has filled another void in the country, providing what some people see as security and protection from Israel. Were the Lebanese army adequately funded and adequately equipped, they could do all of these things, couldn't they? There'd be no need for UNIFIL or Hezbollah. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. We, now recently, I mean, the Lebanese government took a decision to dismantle all militias and to ask for Hezbollah to dismantle its infrastructure, and the decision was about the disarmament of Hezbollah between now and the end of the year. And the Lebanese army has to come up with a plan by the end of August, I mean next week. So the government will have a plan. In that way, yes, I mean the Lebanese army can secure the whole country, not only South Lebanon. So this is why the militias has to dismantle itself, and Hezbollah has to be disarmed. Now, fortunately, I mean in this transitional period, the UNIFIL would stay there to back the army and to help the army. So in 1 year and a half, as a resolution, the new resolution about renewing the mandate of UNIFIL would state, the Lebanese army within this year and a half would be able, I think, with all support from our friends, whether the U.S. or the Arab countries, the Gulf countries, the army would be able to assume its responsibility.
Right. So in the same way that the U.S. provides significant financial support for the army in, for example, Egypt, you would like to see the U.S. step up and contribute more and help more, offer more support to the armed forces in Lebanon.
Absolutely. We need much more for the army to be able to do its the job assigned to it.
Okay, let's go back to talks about what you were saying about disarming Hezbollah by the end of the year and the plan to achieve this being submitted. I mean, do you know anything about that plan? And do you think it's realistic to disarm Hezbollah? After all, Hezbollah doesn't say anything that makes you think they really want to cooperate, do they?
Yeah, but at least now we have a government decision that want Hezbollah to be disarmed. Not only Hezbollah, but the whole all militias and all unlawful, non-legitimate organizations.
Do you think that role can be achieved without sparking civil war?
Absolutely. No, nobody wants civil war,
But is it a danger?
For a civil war to take place, you need two parties. I mean, no sect, no political party is willing to be part of the civil war. Now, the deal now is between the Lebanese army and Hezbollah. So if Hezbollah wants that confrontation, that would be a different story. But now the Hezbollah has to abide by the decision of the government. So this is where we are now. Nobody wants civil war.
How do you assess the chances of this happening by the end of the year? Hezbollah hand over their weapons. I mean, is this really realistic?
Well, I mean, the Lebanese government, you know, as a legitimate government, has different leverage, even on Hezbollah. First, you know, the government had the monopoly of bearing arms, number one. Number two, the Lebanese army, with all its intelligence apparatus, with you know, the right to give permission to bear arms to different groups. I mean, with its all intelligence, they can be able to, you know, to control all actions and all movement of Hezbollah. So yes, the Lebanese army had many leverages to control the situation. Now, one thing, I mean, if Hezbollah wants to confront the government, confront the army, then it will be he has to bear responsibility for all its action. So all we want now is for Hezbollah to abide by the decision of the government. So now Hezbollah is in a situation of unlawful organization, militia, and non-legitimate organization. So he's in bad situation now, and the Lebanese government through the army would have to take control of all areas.
I want to ask you about the visit to Lebanon earlier this week by the US envoy, Tom Barrack. He had to cut short his visit to the south of the country. There were protests. He didn't get the warmest of welcomes. But would you say it was a productive visit overall?
Well, yes. I mean, he's playing a role, you know, in sort of mediation between Lebanon and Israel. He has his plan of like a step for you know, a step for a step. So a reciprocal you know, action would be taken by Lebanon and by Israel. So as long as we dismantle Hezbollah, Israel has to withdraw from many areas. So it's always good to have somebody helping Lebanon, dealing with Israel. So this is what the US is doing. And he proposed a plan, and the government approved his plan. Now, you may tell me Hezbollah is not abiding by this. He's not taking it seriously. Well, he has to bear the consequences, because, you know, it's part of the agreement of cessation of hostility signed by ministers of Hezbollah during the government of Makki back in November 2024. So, which state clearly the agreement that no groups, no armed group should be in Lebanon except the legal, legitimate army and internal security forces. So Hezbollah now is facing a major responsibility. Either the country is going to stay in the state of chaos and in the state of instability, or we're going to all abide by joining the state, by working for the state to have full sovereignty on all over its territories.
Do you fully support the Trump administration's initiatives? Do you agree with every aspect of what Tom Barrack and Morgan Ortagus suggested while they were in Lebanon this week?
Well, yes, it's part of implementing 1701 and the agreement of cessation of hostilities. So, and we go with what the Lebanese government has approved. The Lebanese government has approved the Barrack's plan, and Lebanon is ready to apply the agreement. Now, Hezbollah and Israel, Israel is not fully abiding by this, and neither Hezbollah. So, but for the government, for the Lebanese government to do, is to assume its responsibility and its sovereignty on, over all its territories. So this is the responsibility of the Lebanese government, regardless of what Israel would do or what Hezbollah would do. I mean, the Lebanese government has to take control of its own land, of its own territories.
It's been a very eventful 12 months for Lebanon. Of course, there was the Israeli military operation. There was the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. That's not quite a year ago. I mean, an awful lot has happened, and we've seen repeated visits by people from the Trump administration to Beirut trying to solve these issues, as we've been discussing. Do you think the normalization of ties between Lebanon and Israel is something that we might see happen in the years ahead?
Well, let's start step by step. We have between Lebanon and Israel, we have the armistice agreement of 1949. So let's start first by applying this, and later on, Lebanon would be part of the whole area. If Syria and Jordan and the Gulf countries and all the Arab countries would go for a peace with Israel, well, then it will be much more realistic to talk about it. But now, for the moment, we have many issues that need to be addressed first before talking about final peace with Israel. So we have some disputed area between us and Israel, between Lebanon and Syria. So we have, Israel now is occupying many different sites and different areas. So once we finish with all this, once we have Hezbollah dismantled, once we have full control of the Lebanese government over all its land, then we can start about normalization and long-lasting peace. But for the moment, I think we have many issues, we have many priorities, so it's not the time now to talk about peace.
Okay, so I mean, a lot has happened, as we said, and a lot is happening even this week. I mean, a huge amount is happening. Does it feel like your country is on the track to a brighter future after what's been a very bleak and very alarming 10 years or so?
Well, now I think we have the opportunity now to first, everything would start with basics. The basic for us is to assume sovereignty over all our land. Number one. Number two, we need, for sure, I mean, we're in a deep economic and financial and monetary crisis. So we need reforms, we need state institution building, reforms, we need the infrastructure reconstruction. We have many issues, once we achieve all those, and there is a huge window of opportunity to go ahead with securing sovereignty, with reforms, with reconstruction, if we do all these steps, for sure the future of Lebanon is bright, because the Lebanese people they're smart, they're successful, so we can assume this by ourselves. Definitely we need some help from outside, some financial investment, definitely, but I can assure you that once Lebanon live in stability and in security and in the state of law, then you'll see Lebanon thriving more and more.
Yeah, and just lastly, I mean, we spoke to the Minister for Social Affairs, Haneen Sayed, earlier on this week, and I put a question to her and I asked her if she felt that Lebanon was rising from the ashes, whether it had turned the corner on these bleak years of financial turmoil, of military involvement from other countries. Do you share that assessment? Just to wrap up.
Well, definitely Lebanon will rise from the ashes. I have no doubt. But again, I mean, you need full sovereignty, you need security, you need stability, you need the state of law, because we have a democratic system, we have a pluralistic system that's hard to govern, between the power sharing between the religions and sects. But definitely there is a will now within and a feeling, a will and a feeling within the Lebanese population that they need their country back, and they need a bright future for their kids. So all the will is there, and I have no doubt once Lebanon would have stability and security and full sovereignty, I'm sure that Lebanon will have back our country then.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Richard Kouyoumjian, former minister and head of foreign affairs in the Lebanese Forces Party. Thank you for your time, sir. Well, in addition to developments in Lebanon, there have also been significant developments in neighboring Syria the past couple of days. Well, Syrian state media is reporting that Israeli forces carried out an airborne raid near Damascus after multiple strikes on the site. Well, Israel has not confirmed that operation, which would be deepest inside Syria since President Ahmad al-Shara took power in December of last year. Well, Sara has increasingly accused Israel of seeking to expand its influence in the region. Well, Syria is one of the topics that I will be discussing with my next guest. Well, we can speak now to Christophe Lemoine, who is a spokesperson for the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, who joins me now from the Quai d'Orsay, the French Foreign Ministry, in the heart of the French capital. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, sir. There's some news just into us, actually, about sanctions being reimposed on Tehran by 3 European countries. France is one of them. Could you explain to us why France has decided to take this action?
Well, as you know, we've had a very long negotiation with Iran in the framework of this agreement, which is called the JCPOA, which is the agreement that was reached in 2015. And the 3 European countries have been always privileging dialogue and a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear crisis. Yet, Iran has not made, the needed effort to reach a good point and to reach the negotiations. So this is the reason why that the 3 European countries decided today to action one measure of the 2015 agreement, which is called the snapback, which is the possibility that is offered to every party to reimpose sanction if requirements are not met. And this is the point of what was done today. But there is a 30 days delay in which we hope that the Iranians will go back to the table of the negotiations. But what was done today is just, engaging this snapback clause and, sending a strong message to Tehran that they should come back to the table of the negotiation.
Okay, so this scenario can be averted. What's your message to Iran? What should they do during these next 30 days?
Well, the message to Iran is the same that the message that has been given to Iran for the last years. Again, there is no credibility in the, Iranian nuclear program and no credibility in terms of a civilian program. All this, Iran should comply to the provisions of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and those negotiations should be resuming, so that we will reach a point where we will make a deal with Iran on its nuclear program. And the message is only this one. So what was done today is a strong signal to Iran that negotiations should resume, and we should obtain a result diplomatically through negotiation.
There are lots of topics I want to discuss with you, and I want to turn our attention now to Gaza. And we heard President Macron at the beginning of the week saying that the latest Israeli strikes in Gaza, particularly the one that struck a hospital, were quote unquote intolerable. Just tell us, what is the French government's position with regard to the situation in Gaza?
Well, the French position is very clear, and we've been saying it for many weeks now. There is no military solution to the situation in Gaza, and in that framework, the Israeli strikes are not justified and intolerable. They should be a political and diplomatical solution that would, lead to the creation of a Palestinian state, to what we call the two-state solution, of the two states living side by side in peace and security. Because what we see now in Gaza is that the military operation of Israel brings chaos in Gaza, brings hunger, and brings a humanitarian situation that is absolutely not tolerable. So this should stop, and there should be a movement towards a political solution, a diplomatic solution, where there could be a Palestinian state living side to side with the Israeli state.
And yet, earlier in the month, President Macron did announce his intention to recognize a Palestinian state. And that's something the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says is going to fuel anti-Semitism in France. What does France say to that accusation?
It's absolutely wrong. I mean, France has been, always on the side of Israel when it went to, anti-Semitic aggression, and that was the case of the massacre, the horrible massacre of the 7th October 2023. We've been condemning very strongly what was an anti-Semitic, massacre that day, and we've been, condemning, and we will condemn always anything that has to do with anti-Semitism. Yet the situation is such that there is no military way out. There is no military solution to the situation in Gaza. So there has to be a political solution, and recognizing a Palestinian state is one stone brought to this two-state solution that I was talking about. There is no recognition of two-state solution when there is no recognition of the Palestinian state. And this is why that was announced by President Macron. So this recognition is a signal to go forward, and to go forward towards peace, and to go forward towards stability, and to go forward towards a situation where there could be, for Israelis and for Palestinians, the possibility to live side by side in peace and in security.
It's been a very busy week at your ministry, sir. The week began with the US ambassador to France, Charles Kushner, being summoned by the ministry. He's angered, he says, that the president is not doing enough to fight anti-Semitism in France. He didn't actually attend the meeting. His chargé d'affaires was there in his place. But what was the point of that meeting?
Well, the point of that meeting was very clear. There is one rule in between states in terms of international relation, and one rule that is clear: you don't intervene into national politics. And that's something that all the states will do around the world. And by saying, with this declaration, Ambassador Kushner was, missing within French internal policy, and that was the point of this meeting and of this convocation. This principle of non-immixtion into national politics is entwined in the Vienna Convention on diplomatic relations between states. It's Article 51, and that was the message given to the chargé that Ambassador Kushner was not supposed to make comments about French national politics.
And how did the meeting go?
It went well.
Okay. I want to ask you about another subject, Lebanon. Another subject very much in the news, really, for the last 12 months, but particularly the last couple of days. And Lebanon is traditionally very much in the French sphere of influence, isn't it? And yet this week, it's been very much the Trump administration that's been in town. They seem to be generating the headlines, leading the discussions. How involved does France continue to be in Lebanon's affairs?
Well, you know that the situation in Lebanon is, as you mentioned, carefully followed here in Paris. And you remember that there was a ceasefire agreement that was signed between Lebanon and Israel with the United States and France, and it was the agreement of November 2024. And this agreement is still the framework in which we work with the Israelis and with the Lebanese to restore the peace in the south of the country. So France is still very much involved in the situation in Lebanon. We're still, participating actively in the monitoring framework of the ceasefire, and we're still in close contact with our Lebanese partners, the Israelis, as well as with the Americans. Again, there is one priority for Lebanon, is to restore the stability and the peace in the southern part of the country, with disarming the Hezbollah and returning to a complete control of the Lebanese army.
And in neighboring Syria, Paris, again, involved, Paris brokering talks between the different factions in Syria. Just what is France's level of cooperation with the new leadership in Damascus?
Well, there is a cooperation ongoing with the new authorities in Damascus. You remember that, acting President Sara was in Paris in May, where he met, President Macron, and we're still, confident that the new authorities in Syria will keep their engagement to have an inclusive democratic transition, which means that, a transition that it will engulf all the components of the Syrian society, whether religious or ethnic or political component of the Syrian society. So we're still, very careful about those things. We're still in close contacts with the Syrian authorities about this. And of course, we saw what happened, in the northern part of the country with the Alawites, or in the southern part of the country with the Druze community. And we're still very, following very closely the situation, and we're still in close contact with them. Yet, we also are very supportive to those authorities because we've been contributing to the lifting of the sanctions that were, against them in Brussels, especially the European sanctions, to help the country restart, especially economically. So we're still in close contact with the Syrian authorities, and we're still, helping them, restart the country, but in the same time being very careful about the democratic transition.
I want to move to Ukraine. And the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, "If you give in to aggression, there will be no end to the humiliation you'll have to suffer." And yet we're looking at a situation where Washington appears to favor making concessions to President Putin. And I'm wondering whether France's desired outcome in this is more in line with Winston Churchill or President Trump.
Well, it's complicated to make some comparison because Winston Churchill was, British Prime Minister a long time ago. But what is true is that France is very committed into supporting Ukraine to reach, a ceasefire and a peace agreement that guarantees the security of Ukraine, because the security of Ukraine is in a way also the security of the European continent. So there are active discussions, especially, of course, with the Ukrainian, but also with our American partners. We share the objective expressed by President Trump of ending the conflict very soon. We're following very carefully, the discussions that he had a few days ago with Vladimir Putin. And we're still, supporting very much a solution that will, allow Ukraine to regain its sovereignty and to have, concrete and solid security guarantees.
Okay, now, broadly speaking, how would you characterize France's view of the threat posed by Moscow?
Well, the threat posed by Moscow is now very clear. And what happened in Ukraine in 2022, but what happened in Ukraine in 2014, what happened in Georgia in 2028, it's always the same scenario. Russia wants to regain territories. Russia is aggressive. Russia doesn't hear any argument in terms of negotiation, in terms of international law. They're just, behaving very aggressively. So we know that, and the only stance that we can have is to show Russia that no, it's not going to work that way.
And just lastly, one of the other top headline news stories really this whole week has been the stability of the French government. The Prime Minister, François Bayrou, surprised everyone on Monday announcing that there would be a confidence vote. That's going to happen on the 8th of September. It's a bit of a gamble, and the idea is to break deadlock surrounding plans to reduce French debt levels. You know all of that, but that's for the benefit of our audience. This all carries an element of risk, doesn't it? And I'm just wondering, what was the Prime Minister's calculation in announcing that confidence vote?
Well, the procedure triggered by Prime Minister Bayrou is fully constitutional. That's Article 49.1 of the French Constitution. That is right, to call for a confidence vote. And that will happen on the 8th of September. So we will see what is the outcome of the vote.
Okay, and what happens if he loses? I mean, will there be new national elections?
That I cannot tell you. The Constitution says that if you lose the confidence vote, then the government falls and that you will have to reform a new government.
Okay, well, we'll have to see how events unfold. But we're going to leave it there. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, covering lots of different topics.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Christophe Lemoine, thank you for your time, sir. We're going to focus more on Gaza now, where many people are still mourning the deaths of 5 international journalists killed by an Israeli strike in Gaza at the Al Nasser hospital 3 days ago. Well, amongst those killed was Mariam Abu Daga, who freelanced for the Associated Press. Israel has called this strike a tragic mishap. Well, the Committee to Protect Journalists reports that close to 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza since the war began. Well, let's get more on this now. We can speak to Sara, who is the Middle East and North Africa Regional Director for the Committee to Protect Journalists. She joins us from the Jordanian capital, Amman. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Your organization, the CPJ, has documented the killing of at least 197 journalists and media workers since the war began in Gaza. Of course, there's been widespread condemnation of what's happened from all governments around the world that you can think of. Lots of international anger, and this has turned out to be a deadlier conflict for journalists than the Vietnam War. What's your understanding of why it's been so deadly for journalists?
Thank you very much, Tom. So it's true that for us, the war in Gaza is the deadliest since CPJ started documenting in its history. And it's deadly because of the death toll in Gaza and because of the patterns that we see. To be honest, Gaza is a very small area under siege, and when you see this number of journalists being killed with no accountability, it means that more journalists will be killed over the time because those who are killing them are being able to do that with zero accountability. This is the reason why we are seeing a large number of journalists being killed. But this is not the only reason. This is the reason why they are able to do it with impunity. But the reason behind killing journalists is because local journalists, the Palestinian journalists in Gaza, are the only journalists on the ground who are witnessing what is happening in Gaza and being able to document this and open a window to the world for the reality of Gaza. And Israel, of course, they want to silence this witness and they want to silence the truth. And how can they silence the truth? It's either by killing a journalist or threatening them so they are afraid not to speak more, or by starving them to death.
So what you're saying is the Israelis are deliberately targeting journalists operating on the ground in Gaza?
In many cases, CPJ investigated many cases, and we believe that at least 26 journalists were directly targeted and murdered. We are still investigating in other cases that we believe that there might be a war crime and a murder targeted killing for journalists. But for now, we have 26 journalists confirmed being murdered.
I want to ask you about what happened on Monday 5 journalists, media workers were killed in an incident that Prime Minister Netanyahu has described as a tragic mishap. What do you make of what he said? What do you think of his choice of words, a mishap?
You know, I think that when the hit, so at the beginning we thought it's a double tap, and then last night CNN revealed a new footage, a new video showing that it was a multiple strike, not even double tap. It was 3 strikes in a row. And I think that when when the government discovered that one of the killed journalist was working or a contractor with Reuters, they felt that this might lead to a bigger problem for them, and they decided to go publicly and immediately saying that this is a tragic mishap and that they do not intend, they respect press freedom and journalists, and they would never target and kill civilians. But you see the contradiction between what the Prime Minister Netanyahu said, and later on the same day, the IDF statement said, where they said that they killed 6 terrorists. So they targeted and killed 6 terrorists, which mean that this strike was not at all a mishap like the way Netanyahu described it. They said that they saw a camera on the roof of on the rooftop of the hospital, the medical complex, and they decided that they want to eliminate this camera. But they did not tell us if there was multiple cameras, or they knew if this camera was belongs to a journalist who works with Reuters. So even the investigation and the findings of the investigations that they announced last night were not convincing.
Okay, just tell us, what are the rules of how journalists be protected in countries? I mean, are there obligations by nations to protect journalists working in the field?
Yes, of course. Under the international law, journalists are civilians and should be treated as civilians and not to be killed or harassed. Journalists are not doing their job out of choice. It is a necessity for them to be in war and conflict zone to document what is happening. And when a journalist is wearing their press vest or holding their cameras, they should not be targeted and killed, because a press vest and a camera are not weapons. As long as the journalist is a civilian and does not engage in any military actions, they should be treated as civilians, and they should be protected under the international law. So when a journalist is killed, by the definition of the international law, it will become a war crime, and there is consequences for this. There should be independent investigation and accountability and justice for the victims and their families.
And these, of course, we've been talking about Palestinian journalists for the most part who are working in Gaza, the ones we've talked about who've been killed. The majority were Palestinian.
No, sorry, it's not the majority. All of the killed journalists were Palestinians.
Okay, all of them. Okay.
We don't have any case of any foreign journalist in Gaza who has been killed.
Okay, and I mean, despite international calls for international journalists to be allowed in, Israel seems to be resisting those calls. Why don't you think Israel wants international journalists on the ground in Gaza?
Because it's very easy to discredit Palestinian journalists and claim that they are part of Hamas propaganda and kill them and run away with any kind of accountability when you kill them. It's harder when it's international media. If international media are on the ground and they see what the Palestinian journalists are seeing and they start documenting, it means that they will reveal the truth in a wider way, and also because they are internationals and consequences from their governments will be very grave. Israel will be hesitant to kill them. This is why Israel wants to make sure that the international media and the international journalists are not going inside Gaza, because they need to make sure that they are hiding the truth and hiding what is happening. Because if you are sure that you are not committing any war crimes or killing civilians or starving the population or killing journalists and medical workers, you will not hesitate from bringing the international media inside the country, inside the stripe, and allow them to document and report freely and in a very independent way. But Israel has banned this from the beginning. And even when at the beginning of the war, they allowed for few international journalists to go inside Gaza, it was a pre-planned trip where they took them to certain places, and they were able to report on certain things. Now, while the war, it's coming to its 23 months, and the death toll is in the rise on daily basis, people are starving, people are displaced. Definitely, Israel does not want this to be revealed.
Sure. When we put that question to Israeli officials, they always say, we don't want international journalists going to Gaza because it's a very dangerous place. It's very unsafe working conditions. What do you make of that argument?
To be honest, it's not, for me, this is not even an argument, because journalists and war correspondents has been documenting and reporting from war zones and conflict zones for decades. And by the international law, when they go to a war zone, they should be protected. So the journalist would go to the war zone knowing that I'm wearing my vest, so I will not be targeted and killed. But also they know that it comes with the job. When you go to a war zone and document, you might get injured or killed because of the situation. But they do that because they feel that they have an obligation, and this is part of their mission. So I don't feel that this is a valid argument from Israel, because they can say that we will allow the independent media to go inside Gaza, and we will make sure that we will protect them, but we can't guarantee that. And then they give the international media the choice to go or not to go. I know for a fact that there are many international journalists and media organizations who are demanding that their journalists go inside Gaza and document everything that is happening on the ground. So we know that there are journalists who want to go, and they are willing to take this risk.
Right, yeah, we've spoken to lots of journalists who say they would go if only they were able to get in. Just to wrap up this conversation, Sara, I mean, what do you think will be the impact on how this conflict is remembered, of no journalists being admitted from the outside? How do you think that's going to change the narrative, and what impact might that have on any eventual legal hearings, any eventual tribunals?
To be honest, it's very difficult to really predict what's going to happen. But I can tell you what I wish that we can see happening in the future. First of all, I do not wish to see what is happening in Gaza becoming a pattern in the entire world, where journalists can be targeted and killed, and those who kill them can run away with murder without accountability and without any kind of investigations. What should happen, in my opinion, that there has to be a revision to the international law itself. And we need to have laws that says when there's a conflict zone and there's a war zone, there should not, international media and media should not be banned from covering the war. And there should be concrete measures in how we protect those journalists, identify that they are in the area before the military decides to hit this area. For me, this is how we can think of the future, because otherwise, what will happen in the world to this profession and to all journalists is that they might become a target anywhere just because they are trying to do their job and say the truth.
Okay, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Sara Qudah, the Middle East and North Africa Regional Director for the Committee to Protect Journalists. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, as usual on a Thursday, we take a look at the top news stories coming out of the United States. And joining us today is Amanda Makki, Republican strategist, lawyer, and a friend of the program. Amanda, great to have you with us. Let's start with what is unfortunately a tragic story, Wednesday's deadly shooting at a church-run school in Minneapolis. The FBI Director Kash Patel is calling this an anti-Catholic hate crime. I mean, is this the top news story in the United States on all the channels today?
Absolutely, it is. It's a big tragedy. Obviously, we mourn for two young children starting school, parents sitting in a Catholic church being gunned down. I mean, really sprayed down by this deranged person who basically left this manifesto that was very, I read the full manifesto, all 4 pages, that was so selfish, so narcissistic, saying that, I want to leave this world and this is such a bad place. Why did he have to take the lives of 2 innocent children? And I think what's scary about this is that as someone who is, I have a conceal and carry permit, I do own a gun, sometimes I have these conversations, especially amongst females, that say, I'm scared when I drop my children off at school. I worry that someone, just like what happened yesterday, just like what happened in Parkland, and you name it, every few months, this is unfortunately happening in the United States. I'm scared to leave my kids at school. So what is the answer? Some people may say, well, I'll pull my kids out of school and homeschool, but the reality is that's not available to everyone. So what is it that we need to do as a nation? Our lawmakers, what needs to happen to stop these tragedies from happening? We're never going to stop it, but what can we do to make it happen less?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's been all too many of these sorts of tragedies in the United States. There seem to be regular shootings that take the world by surprise, that shock the world and America, obviously. Has this triggered the usual sorts of debate that we tend to get in these situations about tightening up of gun ownership laws, perhaps reducing the number of guns in circulation? What's being talked about?
This one's a little different. This one's all been about transgenders. So they've been obviously noted that the individual who is deceased, the gunman, was going by the name Robin, but was born Robert, had recently undergone a transition and had transitioned, I guess, not clear on that. But, a lot of this topic has now shifted to the trans. And so, a lot of people on the right are saying, this is mental health. Clearly someone who they've kind of drawn it out from someone who has to transition from being a man to a woman, and the mental health issues that ensues, if they are transitioning, why aren't they getting the mental health that they need? So it's a topic that's always discussed when we discuss, these tragedies that happen. Mental health is always the biggest part of it, because who in their right mind would do this? No one. As a gun owner, never would that happen. The people that I know, that would never happen. So it is clearly someone who's deranged. But what's interesting is that he legally, lawfully obtained those guns. There wasn't like a straw man, someone in the middleman, anything like that, as best as we can tell right now, without further investigation. So they're looking at the mental health. But what's really coming out, if you saw Nancy Pelosi yesterday saying, we protect the trans community, we love the trans community, and others talking about trans rights, even the mayor of Minneapolis himself saying, we protect our trans community. So it was an interesting shift, because typically you don't see or hear that. But I have seen on social media where people have gone back to the most recent shootings, let's say over the last 4 years, and said every single one of these people had some kind of trans ideation, and really putting the onus on the mental health that the people who are transitioning may not be getting. And that becomes part of a much larger debate as to why young children are able to transition from becoming a male to female or vice versa, and maybe not getting the mental health that they need.
Okay, and I just want to pick up on one thing you've mentioned, because you've said it more than once, that you are yourself a gun owner. I mean, do you feel like having a gun, and if more people had guns, that in fact there would be more security on the streets of the United States? Is that where you come from?
Well, here's the reality is that in Washington, D.C., they make it all but impossible for someone like me to own a gun. Now, if I was in law enforcement or previous law enforcement, they do make it a little bit easier. However, for someone like myself, and if I'm living by myself in a city that is ridden with crime like Washington, D.C. or Chicago, or you name the city, I cannot own a gun. In Florida, I can. I take a class, I get properly trained, and I can own a gun. But in D.C., I can't, yet the criminals can. And so this, sparks a larger debate on why law-abiding individuals can't own a gun to protect themselves, their families, their loved ones. If I walk into a Walmart and there's an active shooter, I can't protect myself if I'm in Washington, D.C. I can if I'm in Florida and states that protect those individuals who want to own guns.
Okay, well, you've brought us onto our next topic inadvertently, because I wanted to ask you a bit more about the situation in Washington, because that's been very much in the headlines with President Trump declaring a crime emergency there at the US Capitol. I mean, just how bad is the situation, and what sort of crime are we talking about there?
So as a native Washingtonian, I can kind of run you through the eras of crime in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has been known for crime. We had a mayor, Marion Barry, in the late 80s, and he actually was engaged in hiring prostitutes, and he did crack himself, and they actually set up a sting and busted him in a hotel in Washington, D.C. in 1989. Or it might have been 1990. So this is a city that has been plagued with crime and drugs. What is interesting is that it has been drug-ridden and crime-ridden for so long, but it has gotten by far exponentially worse since COVID. Why is that? Because the city of DC shut down. Until President Trump took office, government employees didn't even have to go back to work. So imagine from 2020 to 2025, the city basically had no one going to work. The requirement for under White House personnel rules was you had to show up twice every pay period. So the city was basically deserted, businesses deserted. So you had crime sprees going on. Carjackings were up over 500% in Washington, D.C. Robberies, major crimes happening in areas that you wouldn't imagine this would happen. I'm sure you heard 2 months ago, a summer intern working on Capitol Hill, wasn't even 20 years old. He was murdered. In a very safe, what is considered a safe part of Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where the homes are well north of $1 million US. And so what President Trump is now doing is he's cracking down on the crime that's happening there, and the results are in. Today, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of Washington, D.C., posted the crime statistics. Overall, violent crime is down 48% from this time period, so from August 7th to the 24th of August, 2024, to the current exact same days in 2025. That's how much the violence has gone down in that same time period. So you are seeing instant results. No one can dispute it. And President Trump is saying, we're going to make Washington, D.C. safe for people again. And he already has. The proof is there. The stats don't lie. And what he wants to do, obviously, which may be where we segue into, is he wants to look at other cities in America that deserve the same thing that Washington, D.C. does, like Baltimore, which is just 40 minutes from Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Amanda, which other cities might President Trump have his eye on? If it's worked in D.C., he's obviously going to try to apply the same formula elsewhere. I mean, one of the cities I heard about was New York. Is that a possibility?
So I've heard more often than New York, I've heard Chicago. Now that may be because he's gone after the mayor of Chicago as well as the governor of Illinois. So I think Chicago may be next, Philadelphia I've heard, and Baltimore. I think Baltimore because of its close proximity to Washington, D.C., as I said, just about 40 minutes away. One of the most crime-ridden cities in America. And the problem here really lies with Washington, D.C. as a territory that the executive branch does have more control over than obviously autonomous cities like Chicago and New York City, or you name the city. So Washington, D.C. is in a category of its own as far as legal challenges that could ensue. But when you see the interviews that are happening in the streets, reporters talking to women, men, people from all walks of life, older, younger, they all want to see their cities come back to being safe again. They don't feel safe. And one thing I always like to tell people, and someone else said this, I heard on a network, was that your feelings don't care about facts. And so if someone says, but look at the facts in Chicago, the facts show we've had less murders or less, this, it doesn't matter. If people don't feel safe, they don't care what your facts are. They care about their feelings. And their feelings right now are Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. These are unsafe cities. They feel unsafe. They want protection. They want the president to come in and clean up these cities. And that's exactly what he's doing. And this is not a bipartisan issue. This is Republicans and Democrats and independents, and whoever you are, you want to feel safe. You want your family to feel safe. Yeah,
absolutely. I just want to move on to our next topic, which is a bit of a diplomatic spat between Washington and Copenhagen. We've had the US Chargé d'Affaires summoned by the Danish authorities. This relates to Greenland. Just tell us a bit more what this is all about.
Well, Vice President J.D. Vance visited Greenland with his wife back in March. And the president spoke at the State of the Union, as he did after, in a social media post, saying, we're not trying to take Greenland away from them. What we're trying to do is make sure that they are being best served. Is the Kingdom of Denmark serving them the best way that they can, or is another country better equipped to take care of this country? And of course, President Trump has made no bones about it. Greenland is important strategically, not just for the United States, but for the global stage, whether it's the threat of Russia or China. The strategic location of Greenland makes it very important on the world stage. So I think he's been very forthcoming about what he wants, but also realizing and recognizing that the people of Greenland will ultimately make that decision. But I think President Trump, being the negotiator that he is, he believes that if you offer them a better offer than what they're getting, maybe they will come. And so I think we will wait to see what happens. Obviously, Denmark is very unhappy about this, and is kind of calling this out and saying, we need to convene because they shouldn't be doing this. But really, it's the people of Greenland that get to make that decision.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk through all of those developments there in the past week in the United States. Amanda Makki, Republican strategist, lawyer, and friend of this channel. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.